we have a very specific 4-step knowledge transfer process that I'd like to share with you. So, 4 steps of the knowledge transfer process. 1, 2, 3, 4. They are somewhat linear, just to make them easy to memorize, but you can do them a little bit out of order. I just draw them this way so that it's easier to get your mind wrapped around and frankly see. The first time I heard this process, I thought, wow, isn't that just how we do things anyway? But actually you find when you get into practice, it's not how things are done on an average daily basis. So the first step is to create a knowledge transfer team. It is a team-based closed system approach. So each one of those words is fully loaded with things. We create a team, on average 5 to 8 people, and each person has a role. So I draw 1, 2, 2 up here because the 3 roles that we talk about are expert, or what we often will call incumbent. Then there's another role which is professional. And then there's next expert, which sometimes they'll call nexpert to make up a word. We often aim to have 1 incumbent, 1 person that is already in a role, 2 people that are ready to take on that role right now, and 2 people that are 1 job away or 2 jobs away from being ready to take on that role. I'll put some numbers to each one of these steps. The team reason is because I've already heard a couple of you say at lunch, there's an age demographic that the world faces. Not every organization faces the same way, but there just were a certain number of births everywhere in the world, mostly related to the world wars that went on. So you've probably seen the curve, but it looks basically like that, where you've got Gen Y, Gen X, and baby boomers. So there's many more baby boomers than there are Gen X, and there's a few more Gen Y than there are Gen X. So if you have your HR data in your organization, your age chart probably looks somewhat similar to that, depending on what you do and who you do it for. But the companies I've worked for, the curve basically looks like that. If you think about your standard backfill approach, you usually would get 2 people in a room and say this person's retiring or this person's leaving or being promoted or whatever's, or being sold off, made redundant, whatever's happening. You'd get 2 people in the room and say, can't lose that knowledge of that person. You 2 share and talk, and there you go. You've now shared it. Somebody else now knows how to do that. It was left up to chance, and this age curve basically proved that that knowledge was just going to walk out the door a few years later anyway because of the numbers. So the team-based approach says we're getting more people involved, and it's more collaborative, and it comes from this is not a one-way transfer. This is by definition a 2-way. We will co-create and figure out together how to do this role or what the knowledge is around this process or this expert or whatever's happening there. So you create a team with these roles. Some companies will use a facilitator, others will not. We currently use trained facilitators to run the knowledge transfer sessions. On average, it's 1 hour per week for 12 weeks. That's the average. It's been much faster than that, and it's been much longer than that. But that gives you a general feel of about how long this takes to run. The facilitator would be people like you in this room. It's someone that understands explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge and yet never uses those words. You get into a room, you get people to talk about how they do something where they don't even realize how they do it. That's what the facilitator training and expertise is in, getting this group to talk about things they don't even realize they know how to do. Step 2 is to create a knowledge transfer plan. It's nothing more than an Excel document, or at least the way we typically do it. It's an Excel document. What the team did first, and what all of our teams do first, is create a knowledge transfer plan. You might say with a naval architect, they do that work for 30, 40, 50 years in one role, getting extremely good at it. How could you possibly learn overnight or in 12 weeks, 12 hours, what they did for 30, 40, 50 years? It's usually about 30 questions. This goes back to one of your earlier points about getting people excited and motivated. This is not the naval architect coming into the room and saying, here's everything you ever needed to know. It's quite the opposite. The naval architect comes in and says, what would you like to know? What do you need to know? What's already in your head and not already in your head? Let's talk about that. The facilitator gets them to come up with, the team, the most difficult questions to have the best conversations in that room with those people. Like I say, it's about 30 questions they come up with. We have an Excel template. We can share that with you. It's got 5 or 6 other columns to it, like the category it belongs to, how can we practice this question. There's some other columns in there. But for the most part, it's very deep, tacit questions for the entire team to then have conversations about, which is step 3. Codify and have conversation. These are your 12 one-hour meetings, give or take. So you've got your 30 questions, then that's your first meeting or 2. Your second or third meeting, you start going back through line by line each one of the questions that the team came up with. So if it's a naval architect, a question from a professional might be something to the effect of, I've never been a naval architect before. What does a naval architect do? That could be one type of question. Another one would be, what got you into being a naval architect? You've been doing this a long time. You must be, what keeps you interested in this role? You're looking to get deeper and deeper and deeper into what is the skill set, what is the deep knowledge they have in that role. In step 3, you'll actually have those conversations and you'll document along the way. We don't necessarily give any template for that documentation. Some teams use Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, Excel, mind maps, dialogue maps, blogs, wikis. It's up to the team to determine the best way for them to document how those conversations went. The very last step is probably the most impactful step, application of knowledge. The very last column in the Excel document in the knowledge transfer plan, so you've got those lists of questions, the last column is called application. The facilitator ensures that every single question has a physical way to apply that question, to actually practice it. These first 3 steps, you've got people in a room or virtually, depending on where people are located, talking and learning that way. The 4th step is to now actually stand up and go do something. So in the naval architect example, you might say, well, part of that is doing your blueprint design for minimizing the number of holes that we're going to drill into the material for the submarine. How did you do that? Well, you can actually create an e-learning, you can create a hands-on practice, you can actually go out to the submarine and look at blueprints, do something very physical where people are making real life changes and getting feedback in real time from the rest of the team. So now you can begin to see in that 4th step where the really deep learning happens. Not only have you talked about it and learned about it and asked some really tough questions, you're now physically hands-on practicing whatever that role is. And from people that are also learning it, getting feedback. So the whole team is learning at the same time. There are 2 or 3 places that we're specifically tied into. The past 2 companies I've worked here both have a fellows program, which is sort of you can go a management route in your career and manage more and more people and manager of organizations, or you can go a technical route where you're not necessarily managing people, you're getting better and better at your specific area of technology. We often call that a fellows program. We've made it a requirement of the fellows program. Once you get to the top level of being a fellow, you are required to start a knowledge transfer team. Whether you're retiring anytime soon or not, it's part of the fellows program. This is where the submarines example or the Lockheed NASA example, the story of the customer is happy, we haven't had any bumps in the road on that contract. We tend to chalk that up as the best measurement we can have. The process is working.